Hi guys, Kristen Smith here, and I'm going to be doing the episode 7 review of The Punisher entitled Crosshairs. Now, this episode we see basically a lot of stuff happen within characters, so Lewis's actions from the previous episode are kind of delved into how that's affecting him. He starts out just like cleaning himself of all this blood, figuring out what to do with the body, going home. His dad kind of intercepts him and gives him this medication. Well, Lewis is starting to feel all this strain on him from what he's been doing, and it just gives up, I guess, and tries to kill himself, but he backs out. And later in the episode, we actually see him kind of making these homemade bombs, and I'm just not sure exactly where he's going to use them or on who or what the purpose is, but it definitely can't be a good thing. And I feel like his storyline will wrap up within the next couple episodes. I cannot imagine that he will be someone who has a part in the rest of the season. I know it's over halfway done, and I kind of didn't expect him to last this long. I did not expect him to be as big of a character as he's turning out to be, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. We also get more of Madani and her partner, and they're still looking for Frank, and they're at this point they're kind of at a dead end because they lost their key asset to try and figure out more information about this. But they do find out that Madani's office is bugged, and so they spend a lot of time looking for the bug and disassembling it and all this stuff. And there's like a nice scene between the two of them, and they basically learn that they have to trust each other, and they have to start working together, and be in communication. And it just cements their partnership. So it's good to see that they're, very united in what they're trying to do. And I think that this could be interesting because until this point, I think that there was a distance between the two of them. And now that this has happened and they've gone through it together, then they should be more united about what they're doing. We also see Russo and Rollins are talking about, setting up plans to try and get Frank out of the way. And they know that he could be a huge problem. But there's also another problem because there's this guy who was involved in all this, Morty Bennett, who's still out there, and he's a lieutenant, I believe. Perhaps, probably wrong, but he's still out there, and Frank definitely will come after him. Like, they know Frank is going to come after him because he's just the next person on Frank's list of targets, and so they don't want Bennett to talk because they know that he's a bit of a scared person who basically will talk if something does happen. And so they want to use Bennett to try and take down Frank. And so they set up this whole plot, and they set up this, situation where Russo's forces will be at this place that Bennett is going to be. He's going to be at this military base. And, so Frank now has to deal with all this on top of Bennett. But before that, we see just the lead into this with Bennett and David talking. They're deciding on how they want to go after Bennett, and they decide to just use the opportunity to collect data from him. And Frank obviously wants to kill him. He basically says as much, and David talks him out of it and says, we are not in this to kill the Bennetts. We're in this to go after the big guys. We're after Rollins. We're after the people who were in charge of this operation. And if killing Bennett will make that harder, then don't do it. And so, we see him just kind of pull back a little bit. We also see him being very uncomfortable with the idea of breaking into this military base because he does have this code that he follows, and he's uncomfortable thinking that he'll have to kill someone who's just doing their job. And so that's really cool to see as well, that he wants to obviously take down these people who did things to him in the past, but he also still has his code and understands that if he has to, he will, but he will do everything in his power to not have to kill someone who is just doing their job. So we see them kind of go to this military base. Frank gets into the base and finds Bennett, and it's hilarious the situation that Bennett is in because he's caught with his pants down, quite literally, because he's really into like the BDSM stuff, and there's some clamps involved, and it's a funny entrance for Frank. I'm glad they put this in there. It's just like these little moments of humor and levity that kind of break up how serious this show can be, and I think they use it very well. It's kind of a light touch sometimes, and I think that serves a very good purpose in this show to make sure that it doesn't always feel so dour. But I just love that they set up the scene in the way that they did, and so now you see basically Frank is caught in this room trying to wait until the data extracts from Bennett's phone, and Russo's forces are there, and so Frank basically takes them down, and he takes them down with these really silent, assassin type kills. And this is again, this show does such a good job about keeping things fresh and never reusing action scenes, because there's so many action scenes. There's at least one in every episode. They do such a good job making it all feel like this is something I haven't seen before, especially at least within this show, because there's obviously lots of action movies and TV shows out there, so this is all stuff we're familiar with, but the way they're doing it feels fresh within the show. It feels fresh within these characters and the story, and they're doing such a great job not rehashing anything that they've already done. And I mean, we're halfway into the season, and I haven't once been like, oh, this feels familiar, like we've been here before. They have just done a really effective job making things different, and it works very, very well for this show. But once the data is extracted, Frank and Micro leave, and Frank has some problems leaving. He does have to end up shooting this guy doing his job, but he just shoots him in the shoulder, and so he doesn't have to kill him, but it still weighs on him that he had to make this decision, and you see that when he's talking to David. But eventually they do, find out where Rollins is through Bennett, and basically Bennett is such a huge loose end. Rollins and Russo both already understand that and basically just kill Bennett off. It's not really a surprise. You kind of saw it coming a mile away. But what you don't see coming is that Frank has now this opportunity to kill Rollins, and we're at episode 7. So this is kind of the big bad of the season. And he's right now within Frank's crosshairs, which is the name of the episode. But he doesn't die. So basically, the glass that he's behind is reinforced, and so the shot that Frank does shoot off, if the glass wasn't reinforced, Rollins would be dead. The glass is reinforced, and now the entire team that is there is aware of Frank's presence. Rollins and Russo knew that this was going to happen. They were prepared for all of this. They were prepared for everything that happened in this episode. And maybe not when it happened specifically, but they knew that it was coming. And so, this next episode could be very interesting with how Frank and David kind of escape this situation. It's basically what the next episode should be, I think. But overall, I really did enjoy this episode. It's one of those ones that there's still a lot of questions that you have to have answered. And obviously, this journey where Frank is trying to kill off these guys is nowhere close to being where he needs it to be in order to finish his revenge tour. But they're building this season in a way that the end feels like it will still be climactic. And it's great the way they're pacing this, because it feels very evenly paced. It's not a rush to the end. There's still a lot of growth left within each character, within each storyline. And, once things start coming together piece by piece, it really feels very connected and not disjointed in any way. Really good job. And we do see that, there's a lot of risk in what they're doing, because the enemies are just as good as they are. And we don't see that a lot in the other Marvel shows. Like, it's always more along the lines of the enemies are more powerful than them, and it's just figuring out how to defeat them. Well, in this case, Frank and Micro are the best of the best at what they do. If Frank's the best at what he's doing, he was one of the best in the Marines, and he's the best at what he does now. And Micro is really good at what he's doing with this technology stuff, potentially the best there is in this, story here, at least in the contained storyline. But the enemy that they're facing is, they're realizing what the strengths are that they're facing and working around it and building around it and putting plans in place so that, even though Frank is so good and Micro is so good, although they don't necessarily know that Micro's working with Frank at this point, they're counting on them to be as good as they are and making plans to basically keep that from happening. And it's cool villain development. It's not something that we've really seen in any of the other Marvel shows up to this point, and I think they're doing a great job making it feel like these villains are realistic. I mean, you haven't had that in a lot of the other Marvel shows. Like the Hand just is completely unrealistic. A lot of the other ones, like Kilgrave, I thought was fantastic, but that was, again, not very realistic. These guys, what they're doing and how they're using their strategy to set up these traps, I just think that what they're doing is incredibly smart. They're making these villains very fleshed out in what they can and can't do, what their strengths are, and how they line up to these main characters, and how it all kind of fits together. This episode is one that I think will work better with the next episode also being viewed together. There's a few of these that feel like the episode should just be 2 hours long instead of split up into two separate ones. But still a great episode, and it's doing its job. I mean, I want to sit here and watch both episodes back to back, and unfortunately that's just not how I'm watching the show this time around. And it's just that it's doing its job. I want to keep watching. So what did you guys think about this episode? Let me know in the comments. Also, you can see my playlist for the rest of my reviews of The Punisher right over there. You can subscribe on over there, and thank you all for watching. I will check you out in the next video.